This is the KhoodeelaarTV television channel, broadcasting under the banner of Baby Angel Geronimo Manifesto for animals and humans. This one is timed at 10:30 GMT on Thursday, the 14th of March 2024. KhoodeelaarTV television channel, broadcasting under the banner of Baby Angel Geronimo Manifesto. Baby Angel Geronimo is the world's bestest witness to the worst, the most corrupt state, the UK. The UK state is currently fronted by the corrupt cabal, personified by sunk Rishi Sunak, who is colluding with the congenital liar Boris Johnson, who is the only incumbent in the Prime Minister's post who was most widely condemned as the liar while in post, and who was discredited by one inquiry after another as a liar. And the Fleet Street newspapers, fronted by the Daily Mail, misedited by the crook Paul Dacre, is promoting the criminal Boris Johnson as the likely rescuer of the electoral chances of the corrupt Conservative Party. The Daily Mail has got very flexible editorial policy, if that can be called editorial policy, which means that it doesn't hesitate before contradicting itself and ditching one moral stance that is at odds with the moral stance that it then replaces it with. Yesterday's Daily Times newspaper, fronted by the controlled by the elder son of the dirty digger Rupert Murdoch, Lachlan Murdoch, carried as many as 3 items about the corrupt business, the criminal business of looting and robbing and distressing the human families of pets, cats and dogs. And despite the fact that they have given the space to the topic, the Times newspaper doesn't actually examine the inherent, inbuilt, latent corruption and criminality of the British judicial system, the British executive, the British Parliament, and most of the British media. Going over the within quotes, election of George Git Galloway on the 29th of February 2024 at the by-election held in Rochdale. After the initial totally misleading and unfounded promotion of the image of George Git Galloway, the Fleet Street newspapers and the media have stopped making any references to him. Because if they did make references to the George Git Galloway, and if they investigated the evidence of his behavior, they would have found that he, George Git Galloway, has been the professional parasite in Parliament. In July 2005, George Git Galloway used the term detour about his then incumbency at the expense of Bethnal Green and Bow constituency in the East London Borough of Tower Hamlets. The use of the term detour exposed Galloway's complete contempt for the constituency, contempt for the constituents, and contempt for the idea of democracy. Because until 2005 general election, George Git Galloway never held a parliamentary seat in England. All his seats, all the elections that he had within quotes won, seeking election to Parliament, member of House of Commons, had been in Scotland. But after being ousted from the Labour Party by then Labour Party fronter, the war criminal, Tony Blair, George Git Galloway found it impossible to get himself nominated for a parliamentary constituency where he could get elected in Scotland. So he was forced to look for a constituency at the next scheduled election, which happened in May 2005. And he did that by impersonating a genuine politician, claiming to care for the Borough of Tower Hamlets generally and for the Bethnal Green and Bow constituency in particular. George Git Galloway never had and still doesn't have a single genuine, dedicated, honest, accountable, transparent Muslim colleague in his so-called team. Because Git Galloway is a racist and he has lied about his position. Until he discovered Rochdale, the discovery was allowed by the Zionist Keir Starmer dropping Azhar Ali as the Labour Party's selected constituency candidate. Until he discovered Rochdale, George Gid Galloway had never heard of Rochdale. Rochdale was absolutely sunk in the grooming of mainly white girls, white children, really, females, but the mainly Pakistani born sexual abusers, exploiters, groomers. To this day, George Gid Galloway has never made one single accessible mention in any significant way about the phenomenon of the Pakistani origin, British born criminals who have been exploiting, mainly targeting and exploiting white girls. When it came to Tower Hamlets, after he got elected in 2005, George Gid Galloway made an astonishing claim that in his 30 years at that date, in April 2006, he was speaking. He said that in 30 years in public life or in politics, he had never come across a corrupt local council as corrupt as Tower Hamlets Council. So what did he do? He proceeded to support an even more corrupt propaganda and program initiated for Tower Hamlets Council by the crooks who operate by abusing the address and the East London Mosque in Whitechapel. And 2-3 years later, George Gid Galloway happily joined the program for infesting Tower Hamlets Council with an additional layer of guaranteed corruption, the corrupting post of elected mayor. Now, in the latest edition of Private Eye, the latest edition of Private Eye, which is dated 15th of March to 28th of March 2024. This is the cover of the Private Lie, and it's issue number 1619. In the Rotten Boroughs column, the Rotten Boroughs page of this edition of Private Lie, they have two items, which is very rare. Two items in succession in a row about Tower Hamlets, the corrupt council. One is about a councillor in the London Borough of Tower Hamlets who had sought a substantial bribe from the owner of a lap dancing club as a condition for the renewal of the club's license. When the club owner refused to pay, the license was not renewed. Following a High Court hearing, the attempted corruption could cost the council hundreds of thousands of pounds in costs and damages. The sexual entertainment venue license for club Oops in Ali Street, Whitechapel was due for renewal in May 2022. But club owner Santosh Nair, it's obviously Hindu name from India, submitted his application a day late and it was deemed invalid. When Nair's fresh application came before the Council's licensing committee on the 26th of September 2022, it was refused and the club was forced to close. Santosh Nair challenged the council's decision on the basis that a councillor who sat on the licensing committee sought and failed to elicit a substantial bribe in return for the granting of the license, according to a High Court judgment. It is alleged the councillor claimed to be acting in collaboration with 4 other members of the committee. The bribe was not paid and the license was refused. The council, the Tower Hamlets Council, has agreed to reinstate the club's license and pay Santosh Nair's legal costs and damages. Given that he is claiming for 16 months loss of business, these are expected to be substantial. Now, this item, in common with the rest of the items in the so-called Rotten Boroughs page, is put together by a very weak, timid, ignorant, stupid, and himself corrupt individual. This item, as I have read, is even less than a tip of the iceberg of the corruption that Tower Hamlets is sunk in. Then the next item is about Luthraman, which is equally stupid, ignorant, ill-informed, and itself corrupt. It says, during his first stint as elected mayor of Tower Hamlets, Luthraman was found guilty of electoral fraud for making false statements, undue spiritual influence, and bribery after distributing millions in grants to political allies. Well, this is not political allies. This is fellow crooks. Luthraman is crook and corrupt, and the ones that he gave millions in grants to are crooks as well. And when George Galloway pointed out in April 2006, just a month before the 2006 May election, that he, in his 30 years in politics or public life, had never come across as Tower Hamlets Council a corrupt council as it was. When he pointed that out, it was assumed that Galloway would set about opposing corruption following the then scheduled election of 2006. Far from doing that, Galloway allowed the crooks in the so-called disrespect party that he fronted at the time to totally get involved in the corruption of the council. Now back to the item in the private lie about Luther Roman. Quote, now the government has appointed 4 independent inspectors to review a catalogue of concerns which risk replicating the circumstances under Raman's first term that led to his dismissal. Since taking office again, Raman has appointed former acolytes, including Steve Halsey, as chief executive and former election agent Alibor Chowdhury, who the election court described as Rahman's hatchet man, who did the dirty work. Now this idiot who writes this Rotten Borough's column is so stupid. This is again less than the tip of the iceberg of the corruption that Luther Roman personifies, and then the corruption that the people of Tower Hamlets have been lumbered with. Now, back to the column, and a piece headed Double Trouble is about Michael Gove's stupidity in appointing a crook from Croydon called McArdle. But this Rotten Boroughs doesn't use the word corruption, really, let alone crook. But it's all about corruption and crooks. When Michael Gove announced £2.48 billion of exceptional financial support to 19 English authorities, Birmingham City Council getting 1.26 billion of that, few remarked on the presence on the list of both cash-strapped councils in Northamptonshire. Northamptonshire is getting 3.9 million and West Northamptonshire 6.6 million. Both Conservative councils have only existed since April 2021. They were formed when Northamptonshire County Council was abolished, along with 7 district councils, after it had become the first council this century to issue a Section 114 notice. In 2018, West and North Northamptonshire were formed after government-appointed inspectors concluded that problems at Northamptonshire were so deep-rooted, that they could not be fixed. One of those inspectors was Tony McArdle, who in 2021 was parachuted into Croydon, the second council to go bust this century. There he is chair of the Improvement and Assurance Panel with statutory powers. So slow has been improvement at Croydon that Gove extended McArdle and his panel stay by a year to 2025. Croydon is getting another bailout this year, 38 million, to balance its budget. McArdle is paid £1,000 per day in Croydon. His 4 colleagues £900 per day, all funded by local taxpayers. Last month, when Gove was announcing the exceptional financial support, he appointed McArdle to head a similar committee of government troubleshooters at Nottingham City Council, which is to get 66 million, working on a similar day rate. And this idiot writing these Rotten Boroughs says troubles all around. What the fuck is that supposed to mean? There is a piece about Islington councils and child abuse. I shall be talking about that in the next relevant edition. Shall be talking about the corrupt criminals running the criminals' business, fleecing humans that have unwell cats and dogs. This we are ending at 26 minutes at 10:45 GMT on Thursday, 14th of March 2024.